Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for day 6 of the Light Wellness Experience Workshop. You have done an incredible job keeping up with the content. I see you logging in live and watching the recordings, and I'm so excited for all of the participation and the viewership that we've got in this workshop. I hope that you are getting as much from it as we are trying to give, because if you haven't recognized yet, right, this conversation about light and its impact on our health, particularly our circadian health, is so critical to a personal caretaking regimen and conversation. And with that said, there's so much that we do on a daily basis, as you know through some of our earlier sessions, to juggle a healthy lifestyle. And more often than not, as time goes on, as we age, we can feel our body wearing down a little more and a little more. And we'll go to our doctor and they'll say, oh, it's just the aging process, right? And then we get prescribed some sort of a medication, or we're given tips on different ways to juggle certain areas of the pillars of wellness to create a more healthy or active lifestyle for ourselves. And a lot of times the link that's missing, that gap in the conversation, is all regarding circadian health and that foundation of our health and well-being. And that maybe if we develop a more conscious lifestyle under light, we may be able to tend to some of those ailments as we grow in age, or recover, right? We might be young, we might sustain an injury that is impeding our daily lifestyle, and then we need to go to a physical or an occupational therapist in order to support ourselves. And that is what today is all about. Being able to understand from not just a pharmaceutical standpoint, but from a holistic standpoint, what you can do in your daily lifestyle in order to support your well-being, and what type of therapeutic practices or what types of solutions and strategies can be used inside therapeutic practices in order to enhance a patient's recovery, resiliency, and ability to get back to the life they love living. Right. So with that said, I hope that those of you who are joining us have taken the opportunity to go to the Light Vitality Group website. You go to www.lightvitalitygroup.com. You click on the resources tab in the upper menu, and you can go to learn and then the literature tab. So I will drop that link after this session to make sure you all have it yet again. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, we have workshop resources for PT and OT professionals that give you some tips for solutions and strategies inside open environments within a variety of different clinical settings. And you can even take these and apply them to your residential setting as well. And so we're going to be reviewing a few of those today with our holistic occupational therapist, Anna Hernando. She has been working within the holistic OT realm for over 25 years now. She has a breadth of experience that covers what to do, what not to do, right, with patients, and in terms of getting those services provided to them. And we're going to be talking about some of the experiences that she's had. She's going to be sharing some insights and tips on her practice and how you may be able to implement or integrate some of these strategies and solutions into your existing business model. Or if you're interested in starting your own practice and kind of breaking out of the traditional realm and really looking at and investing in a holistic therapeutic practice. So she's got some tools and resources for you there as well. So with no further ado, I'm going to bring Anna into the conversation. Hi there. How you doing?
Hi, glad to see everybody. Thank you so much. This is just so much fun, and I love the topic. I'm just so incredibly impressed with the resources you've put together, the information that you've been sharing, and I really hope that everybody does really tap into what you have to offer, because I haven't seen anybody really actively offering the breadth of information that you have. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's something that comes up a lot in the conversations that I have with clients and just general community members, and even lighting designers and people specific to my trade and even outside of the trade, that a little bit, you get kind of little drips of information here and there, right? We read an article about getting healthy morning light. We read an article about avoiding blue light, at night and turning off our devices. We read articles about how important sleep is, and what types of benefits we get from having quality sleep hygiene and sleep health. But we haven't really put it all together, and connecting those dots can be a very complex conversation. And as we were mentioning earlier in one of our conversations, is that we're now not just connecting dots. We realize those dots don't need to be connected just with pen and paper. Those dots are very kind of metaphysically connected through very specific types of light. And so we're drawing and painting with light now throughout our life. And I think that a lot of people, because light is so intangible and it's energy, right? How do you work with energy? And how do you understand how it's impacting you and what you need to be doing to mitigate it day in and day out to kind of create the healthiest life for yourself? And so that's why this workshop was created, so that we can connect with individuals like yourself, so that we can get this message out there and pay it forward in a multitude of ways. But first and foremost, really help individuals understand how to connect those dots and not feel so overwhelmed with just the mass media and information that's being dropped on them every single day about health and well-being and all these kinds of scientific revelations, right? Let's bring it back down to earth and make it a little more grounded.
Right, right. I think one of the big thing is that, the media takes one aspect of a wellness, and the pandemic has really shoved wellness down everybody's throat. But it's really looking at, like, everybody thinks wellness is automatically just diet. And really, I would tell people to start there last. Like, start there last and really take a deep look at circadian rhythms and how they impact you. Because one of the things that most people don't realize is every single cell has a circadian rhythm. It's not just, oh, there's circadian rhythm of the planet. No, every single cell of your body has them. And so one of the things that, so PTs and OTs specifically really get a lot of vision, low vision. We work in low vision. The diagnostic code is really visual disturbance is the one that we can use. That's a billable code. And then you would tie it to a medical diagnosis like diabetes, macular degeneration, something to that effect. And then you have visual disturbances can be along the treatment. And then also we can utilize muscle weakness and getting into the specific of the ocular motor muscles. So the eye muscles, really. So you can really dial it down that way if you're looking to bill. And I take private pay. So if everybody's asking, like, well, how does she bill it? I did have a private practice about 12 years ago where I really intensified working with, at the time, children that were just beginning to be recognized on the spectrum. 12 years ago, people were like, no, what is that? And really focused on light therapy. And so one of the ones that we used a lot was visual disturbance along with muscle weakness of the eye. So we were able to qualify us and get payment through insurance for those types of things. But for PTs, they might be thinking, what am I doing, right? And so it's really important for physical therapists to also recognize that because each cell has a circadian rhythm, that ties into pain. Okay. And so if the focus is pain, or the patient is coming for pain related issues, we need to go into a time management type of thing, like when a diary that stipulates when am I experiencing that pain, and really take a look at if it's at night. Am I experiencing that pain at night? Am I experiencing it in the early morning? Am I experiencing it midday? And looking at that circadian time frame of like, okay, here's what's going on. The body has been stuck in a perpetuated cycle and has created its own circadian cycle loop that's maladaptive. So if we can look at, let's get them back in sync with light, that's going to help break up that pain loop that they're in. Right? So it's not just, hey, I'm going to look at vision. It's this whole entire total person that we're dealing with. So I think I gave you guys, I gave you a reference sheet, and I hope that you'll drop that somewhere. And
Yep.
that has, some studies in there. There's one definitely on circadian and pain and that loop that I was just talking about.
Yeah.
But also, with you're dealing with children on the spectrum, or even adults on the spectrum, there's something that is not adequately synthesizing within the circadian rhythms. And so that's why you get these really interesting sleep cycles, being up all night. And I have a personal little bit of story. So I have a sister who is older than I am, and she is now, and I say now because now we have the awareness of what we would call on the Asperger's spectrum. And when I was younger, when I was little, my mom would call it, she gets her nights and days mixed up. That's what my mom would say. Your sister has her nights and days mixed up. And so we would be up all night, keeping my sister awake so that we could reset her so that and all night and all day, so that she would have this 24-hour 48-hour period where she was awake, so then she would sleep at night and be awake during the day. That was my mom's way of resetting her internal clock. So it was really kind of interesting to see back intuitively. My mother knew that she was out of sync with the rhythms, and by aggressively keeping her up when she wanted to be asleep in order to get her back in sync was pretty insightful on her part. But she also recognized some other things, and that's what we've talked about is gut health and what she was eating and the time frames that she was eating.
Mhm.
And so it's not just one little part of wellness. So if you're looking at, our patients, they come to us most of the time. If you're working in adult population, you're going to see them for pain, but it's usually going to be, they're going to have diabetes on there. They're going to have more than just one diagnosis. And let's just be completely honest. Most people present with what used to be called type 2 diabetes, which is, again, let's be honest, it's lifestyle diabetes. It really is lifestyle diabetes. So if we can just start with getting people to just take a diary, no judgment. You want some help? Let's just take a diary. What times do you eat? Let's just look at it. What time do you wake up? What time do you eat? And many times when people start doing this, and just tell them, just be honest. I mean, if you eat grapes at 11 o'clock at night, put it down. I just need to know, so that we can start looking at, okay, a high sugar food that late of night is not good for anybody, because you're not, unless you're working at night, right? You're not burning it off. Your body doesn't have the time to burn that short fuel. And so if you're going to sleep after having a handful of grapes for dessert, this was my mother-in-law, by the way,
Or M&Ms.
yeah, or M&Ms, or that, quick little ice cream or whatever,
Yep.
then your body is going to have to kick up the insulin production so that it's burning that sugar while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So it's burning this fuel while you're sleeping, when you sleep is when the body's supposed to be repairing itself.
Yeah.
So you're sending these messages to your own body that literally say, you don't know what you're doing. I'm going to take over. And so you're automatically just messing it up on your own. So if we could just educate our patients and clients as to, okay, really, we shouldn't have anything high sugary like that after 3 o'clock, just because you don't have the time, unless you're going to go run a nighttime marathon, you don't have the time for your body to burn that up. And so that's actually where we start with, if somebody doesn't want to take into consideration their circadian part. So you just start with, okay, let's just look at your food and what time you're eating.
Yeah.
Nice, because you recommended, I think it was in day 2, maybe it was day 1. There's Circadian App, and that app is fantastic. I went and downloaded it because I was like, oh my gosh. And
it's awesome. It's so insightful. It creates a daily schedule for you based on your circadian rhythms and the rise and fall of the sun in your geographical area. I mean, it really dials it all in for you. So all these complex things that we've talked about throughout the workshop, it's done for you. You don't even have to think about it. And you can set as many alarms as you want in order to be reminded of it. So again, it's taking that kind of thought process. I mean, we want to be mindful, right? But it supports you because there's so much to be mindful of when it comes to circadian health, right?
Yeah. And with our patients, a lot of times they're just overwhelmed. They're just overwhelmed with the
Yeah.
plethora of information and all the behavioral changes you're trying to get me to make. So we
Mhm.
need to just pick one. And so if let's just stick with our person that has diabetes, and we're gonna stick with the food part. If we tell them, let's download this app. And I did recognize, it's a free app for I think a short period of time, but even still, it's really inexpensive. I think it's $40 for a year. Guys, that's really inexpensive.
Yeah.
That's even less than, a lot of books, or that's just less than a prescription for most people. So,
Yeah.
what's great about it is then you can even put, for example, I get up at 4:50 in the morning. It's still dark where I live. I live in Texas. It's still dark, but that's when my day starts. And so when I plugged that in, it was telling me, okay, and here's when is ideal time for you to eat breakfast. It's just an ideal time, And so if you're striving for that, and here's when you need to take a break. And that's the other part. It was really great about, hey, take an outside break, which is fantastic. When the pandemic first started, I was telling my clients, I know you're working from home, but you still have to get up and you still need to go. Can you work outside today? Can you sit here? Can you move around? But it sends you those alerts. So if you're dealing with somebody who's like, I can't keep up with all these things, it's really kind of like a one-stop app will set those things for them, and then telling them like, hey, stop eating after this time, which you think is going to be really early, right? But it's not. I think mine was at 7:30 last night, which is not a bad thing. So it's
Yeah.
actually late, but but
Well, and it's funny. So it's interesting that you bring that up because, I'm sure you've heard of, and I hope that the word is getting out to everyone out there. But, there's all different types of meal plans and diets and fasting regimens. There's intermittent fasting. And now we're coming out with this, they've coined it and they understand there's the circadian fast, right? It's not just a fad. It's a general understanding that just as we didn't understand in the advent of electric light what we were doing to ourselves, right? The reason we didn't know that that's what we were doing to ourselves, that we were taking away this critical health component to our lives, was because we didn't understand the critical health component to our lives. Right. And it wasn't until we understood circadian rhythms more intimately and deeply that we were able to start tying light rhythms and day night cycles to circadian rhythms. And so, people look and they're like, oh, circadian fasting, that's the new fad. No, actually, that is your life. That is the way it was. Our bodies were always designed to perform. It's what we need to channel back into and understand that there are very specific ranges of time that we should be eating. And not just to say we need to be eating breakfast at this time and lunch at this time and dinner at this time, but to say that we need to be having all of our meals, however many calories they are, however many times you break it down into. Are you doing, 5 to 6 small meals? Are you doing 3 big meals? Are you doing 3 big meals, or, two big meals and 1 medium meal and 2 snacks, right? However you're breaking down your meal plan throughout the day, it needs to be happening within a 10 to 12 hour range, because that is the circadian rhythm of our body's waking day active cycles, right? So if you wake up at 7 a.m. and you have your first meal at 8 a.m., then your last meal should happen anywhere between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., right? And then no more food after. It's not just fasting, right? That's just our body understanding that these digestive enzymes are going to be at their, kind of peak power during the kind of daylight hours of the day, that our leptin and ghrelin hormonal hunger hormone schedules are going to be the most active during those hours of the day, because it recognizes that the body is awake. And if you've been joining, everyone who's watching now and everyone who's going to be watching the recordings, if you've been watching and following the workshop, we took, some pretty deep dives into the human growth hormone and understanding sugar and insulin regulation, and why it's important to really pay attention to when you eat. Because circadian fasting isn't, like we said, it's not a fad. It's not just to say, hey, you should be eating during the day because that's when you're awake. No, the reason we say that is because when you fall asleep and all of those evening active processes and rhythms are getting up and going, one of those evening active rhythms is the secretion of the human growth hormone. The human growth hormone takes all of that food that you've eaten during the day and it breaks it down and allocates where it goes in your body to make sure that you're recovering and repairing. It's giving all of those muscles that have torn a means to be able to repair themselves. It's giving your body a means to grow new muscles, right? And it's regulating, it's detoxing the body and moving, good sugars to where it needs to go, and it's removing bad sugars from your system so that in the morning when you wake up, and this might be a little too much TMI, but it is a very important part of the circadian process, is that when you have your first bowel movement, right?
Yep.
And that's what's happening. All of those negative, toxins that your body and the human growth hormone has been working so hard throughout the night to detox your body, right? It's all being expelled in those first few moments after you wake up. And it's such a critical component. So when your doctor asks you, well, are you having regular bowel movements, right? And you're like, oh my God, that's uncomfortable. Like, no, it's a very natural process, and it's so important to your circadian health. So, I hope
Well,
I'm not grossing people out.
yeah. Well, and well, in occupational therapy, we talk about all bodily fluids, right? But with some people, they really forget, or even just they forget that you should have frequent bowel movements. It shouldn't be one, and the clinical term of constipation is not having a bowel movement for 3 days. But 3 days is a long time, But really you should be having regular bowel movements, especially if you are eating on this timely zone, because your body is going to be using what it needs, dispelling it, using what it needs, dispelling it. And then that way, when you stopped at night, it's going to take all the repair and it's going to eliminate what it doesn't need. So if you think about, food is your fuel, and you wouldn't, gas up your car and then just think, okay, well, I'm just going to let it sit here for hours on end, right? You would be like, okay, I'm going to use all of the gas that I can before I park it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are with food, and getting in line with where your clock is. But it's very important. So you were talking about, when you're sleeping. So there's an article that I shared on that circadian rhythms and aerobic glycolysis for people on the spectrum. So it's all the science is really starting, or I would say the research is really starting to really take a look at this component. And not to discredit any medical doctors. Please don't think that we're here discrediting any medical doctors. It's just that there's so much for them to learn that many times, unless they take an interest in it, they're not going to take a deeper dive. They're going to say, okay, so tell me about your bowel movements. And if you say, yeah, I have a poop every day. But if you don't tell them, okay, I have that poop at like noon, but that's it. Or, I have one at noon today, and then, at 6 p.m. and that's it. Or I just have one at 6 p.m. So if you think about, bowel movements is just waste. That's all it is. It's just what's left over, and it's waste. And so your body is holding on to that waste. And the longer your body holds on to it, it enables it to seep back through in the intestinal lining. And so if it's seeping back through, where's that going? And what is it now doing to your cells? And where is it now overloading the rest of the systems, the filtration systems in your body? Yep. So it's really important that, you have this, normal bowel movement type of thing. And normal meaning like, you should have one when you wake up in the morning, drink some water, get that kind of going. Mm-hmm. But, also just taking the right pre and probiotics are very important to really supplement that gut health, because that's the other part of it is our lifestyle, our stress, being out of sync with the environment, the earth. We've disconnected from the soil because all of our stuff is overly farmed and just kind of filled with all kinds of other toxic stuff that our body doesn't have the enzymes that it really does need in order to break everything down like it should. And then the more stressed out you are, the more those enzymes aren't created either. So we really have to look at this whole gamut. But which is a lot for OTs and PTs. So just giving on where you are in your practice. So if you're working with geriatric population, there is a lot of information out there for geriatric populations, specifically for occupational therapists on low vision. And so I will say, we need to utilize best practice and evidence based. And so that as much as everybody hates to hear it, that really does mean using a type of measurement. It really does say, let me use a standardized assessment so that I can, definitely see that this intervention is working, and not just for your patient, but so that you can show the doctors. Because the more, we all know that the more that, just look at autism, guys. Just look at autism. It was really a grassroots kind of thing before it came up to the doctors. I remember having doctors, when I would send patients to them, saying, hey, this kiddo I see has these things, and it looks like it would fall under autism spectrum disorder. And they would be like, that's no such thing. That isn't anything there because it's not in the manual. And I'm like, no, it's a thing. So the more that we're doing this from this part, then the doctors are going to be like, hey, you know what? I'm seeing this in my patients. I'm seeing these results. I'm seeing these before and after scores. And for occupational therapists, in the resource list, there is what's called it's the Low Vision Independence Measure Revised. And so there's a research article for you guys there that really looks at what are the occupations, what are the activities that are affected by low vision. And that's reading, financial management, meal prep, medication management, home management, leisure participation, functional mobility, out of home mobility, and then, of course, driving, right? So you have basically everything, really, really look at it. And so it's really looking at a pre and post test for what they're seeing, what's being affected because of low vision. And so by starting with that assessment, now you can go into some of the other things, which for, back in the early on when I started in working with light therapy, was really just looking at what are your eyes drawn to? And your eyes are drawn to light and movement. And so, we get kind of upset over all the kids that have attention deficit disorder. Now, all the adults that have attention deficit disorder, because their visual, there's no eye contact. There's poor eye contact. They're all over the place. Well, that's a skill. Those are muscles. And the more screen time we spend, all these little pop-ups. You think about the games, and there's this thing coming over here and this thing coming over here. You look at you're on Facebook or you're searching the web, and you have all these other pop-ups coming to you, and your eyes are naturally drawn. And so what does is that creates weakness in the smooth pursuits and the saccades. And so when you have that, you're automatically going to be constantly going, and it really is making your eyes constantly divert. Everything's going. Okay. And so we as therapists need to look at, okay, how do I strengthen these ocular motors, right? And how do I get them to focus on this here and tune out the visual distractions? And so that needs to be trained in. And so part of that is, one of the things is that when the eyes are drawn to light, is the simplest thing is making your screen dark mode. Take your phone and put it on dark mode. I don't know if you've mentioned this in the others. I'm still catching up on all the wonderful information that you've shared in the other sessions. But that's one of the things that, 12 years ago when I had my PEDS clinic, is I would just tell the parents, take the e-reader and turn it into the dark mode. And everybody was like, wow, you can do that? And it's kind of like, well, why? Well, we think back, we invented the light. Now we have all these problems. Well, we had chalkboards. That's how we learned. And back in the early school days, they had a slate, right? They had a slate and they used white chalk. Well, again, your eyes are drawn to the light. So we would see the letters, we would see the numbers, because the background was dark and the information was light. Yeah. And so we were able to sustain a focus. We were able to follow. Our eyes didn't jump so much. And so just telling people, revert back, especially with the kids now, everything's online, everything's in a computer state. Yeah. So if they can change their phone to dark mode or their computer to dark mode, that's really significantly going to help with the amount of light that's coming in and how hard the eyes have to work to take in that information. Same thing with schools, right? They've gone to whiteboards. Why in the world have they gone to whiteboards? Really. They can get the blackboards just the same and have the white markers instead of the green and the blue and all the others, because that's really challenging for the visual system. It wouldn't be if we were only looking at it like for 30 minutes out of the whole entire day, but we're not. We are literally, kids are waking up with this stuff in their eye, in front of them, and they're going to bed with this stuff in front of them. And so the eyes are just like, what? We're
Well,
exhausted.
they are. And it's interesting that you say that, because even in the lighting industry, we have something called IES recommendations. And it's the International Engineering Society. And we base our lumen or our light output levels and recommendations on visual performance and visual comfort. And one of the issues that always comes up is in an educational setting, when you want to illuminate or highlight a whiteboard in a classroom, you have to be really delicate. Like we are only allowed so many lumens on a whiteboard because of that reflective light and that glare discomfort, right? And so we're like, oh, what's that balance between making sure that people can see it, especially those who are far back in the classroom, who have other light trespass going on in their visual field, right? But you don't want to make it so bright that the people who are at the front of the classroom are getting this glare effect, when if we had a blackboard, that black would absorb a lot of that light, and it would really only make the information that needs to stand out pop, rather than overwhelming your visual field with white. And so it's something that actually comes up pretty frequently in the lighting community as well, in that context and environment. And just from a circadian standpoint, what we're giving them we're keeping kids indoors, right? We're asking them to go into school in the wee early morning hours before the sun comes up. We're keeping them indoors with limited access to daylight. Like, maybe there's a window, but maybe the windows in the morning are western facing, and depending on what hemisphere you are in the world, right, you might not be getting the afternoon light that you need to be getting because it's on the opposite side, right? So if you're in the northern hemisphere, you're getting northern light from your afternoon windows, or in the southern hemisphere, southern light from your afternoon windows, when it really needs to be the opposite, right? Because that's solar noon. And if you have the Circadian app, it tells you what solar noon is, right?
Yes,
Right?
right.
Awesome.
It does. It's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
But
yes, so
yeah, we're
working.
limiting essentially their ability to get the healthy quality of light that they need in the day to wake up and be their most alert, to be their most stimulated, to be their most productive, to give them the best reasoning and thinking skills, and give them, to kind of set the tone for their mood for the day, right? We've eliminated so much of what is important to kind of starting off a child's day. And then we put these expectations on them and these extracurriculars on them, and then these additional tests on them that extend their waking life into the late night hours. So they're not getting the adequate hours of sleep in order for their body to restore, and they're not getting able to actually set the rhythm for their day so that they can even wake up and their body can do the things that they were meant to do naturally. And it's an epidemic. The school age child and the sleep health of a school age child has become an epidemic since the advent of electric lighting and kind of moving life indoors in a built environment. Sorry, I think I cut you off in a moment.
No, you're fine. Yeah, but that's exactly so. Where I'm in Texas, so what they did is they're like, oh, teenagers need more sleep time, so they made the school start later instead of really looking at true. But instead, really, there should be a look at, okay, what time are they going to bed? What time are they turning at their devices? Because instead of, I used to I would tell my kids, TV used to shut off at midnight for a reason. And we don't even do that now. Like now it's 24/7, right? But it would shut off to say, hey, guess what? You need to go to bed. Like United States bedtime, right?
Yeah.
But the kids are, it's great school, but they're not sleeping that, because that just means I get to stay up later and play on my phone because I don't have to get up for school, instead of looking at the whole thing. And so that's kind of where, as therapists, like if you're working in the school systems, You can't come in there and just change everything within your school. It would be great if you're included in the conversations to go back to, hey, you know what, and keep, pre and post. If you're keeping test scores as far as like looking at the Barry Bruinsky visual motor integration, there's a reason that's on green paper. There's a reason why the visual perceptual test is on blue paper. There's a reason why the motor performance is on like a brown paper. There's a reason, right? So that you're getting this visual assessment on these different color papers based on the lighting. But if you're in the school systems or you're working in early childhood intervention, you can look at these kinds of things and you can make these suggestions. And hopefully you're engaged in your school boards and things of that nature, or in the decisions of a school, and you can say, guys, here's what's going on. And if you don't think you have that kind of power, I'll give you an example. I shared many years ago information with teachers on the wiggle seats. So back there was a study that showed that kids who, and we know this for kids who have attention deficit, we know this for kids that are on the spectrum, if they are able to bounce or move in their seat, they're able to attend better. Well, this was on all children. And so it literally showed that just having kids be able to wiggle in their seat, just everybody's test scores were improved. Their performance was improved. So I just shared it with some teachers. And when the parents asked, what do you need for your classroom? They wanted the Theraball seats.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have two elementary school teachers who their classroom is Theraball seats, and it's just because they asked that for their parents. And so they have people, and then every year they're like, anybody have any exercise balls they're not using? And they just recycle them there. And they put rules for behavior, like if you're misbehaving, it's taken away, Yeah. So they have rules, but they really showed a difference. So if you're in the school systems, just go to your teachers, talk to who you have contact with, and then get engaged at your school and really show them the numbers, right? Show them what you've got. And if you're in the geriatric population, if you're working in a skilled nursing facility or / nursing home, rehabilitation center, a lot of times we don't want to take the patients outside. It's too cold or it's inclement. But most people in your therapy gym have outdoor lighting. You have windows. And so instead of putting them on the arm bike, because there's a device there's the new step machine. I think you have that. And it'll be in the middle of the room, or it's facing the wall, or there's another arm bike that has a computer screen on it. To cover up the computer screen, close it down, put it right by the window, and have them look outside. And while they're doing the exercise, have them give you things that are outside. You can even go plant things outside and have them like play a little I Spy while they're doing this upper body exercise or lower body exercise that's engaging the visual system. So many, many times we just overlook the visual system and actively engaging it. I'm not saying you're like, well, there's no eyeballs there. I mean, actively engaging it because we're not quite sure how it fits in. So definitely look at visual field testing. One of the assessments that I did when I had my PEDS clinic is we would do a visual field test. And if you're not sure, and they get with your patients and say, are you going for an eye exam? Can you have your doctor give us your visual field? Because they're getting that done. Just ask for the report so that you can kind of gauge where they are with the visual field. Exciting thing about visual field is it will show to you where there's brain damage. If the person has had a concussion, you can see that in a visual field test. And so that's going to let you know that, okay, just given without all the lighting issues, this person has a visual field deficit. And so now I need to work around that. But looking at what's going on in your facility, what kind of lighting, one of the simple things too that I used to recommend is put green tissue paper over top of if you're have those big long lights, your LEDs or what have you. If you can't get your company or your facility to invest in good quality light bulbs like what we're discussing here, then take tissue paper and just stick it over top of it so that you are breaking up that light refraction. So a lot of it is that we just have, light is a frequency, and you've shared that quite a bit, but that frequency correlates to components in our body. So when I was doing light therapy, some of you think about the chakras of the body. There's a lot of chakras, but most people stipulate with the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh chakra. And there's a color that's associated to each one of those. And they correlate to plexus in the body, right? So ruby and red are those first and second chakras. And that first one grounds you. So when you're dealing with people who are flighty or overactive, are they grounded in their body? Is there energy in their body? And if my energy isn't in my body, I can't focus on anything anyway. So looking at, what's going on around me and what type of those light frequencies am I being overly exposed to and then underexposed to? So all of it is so fascinating. But when we start looking at what's going on with my client and where can I start looking at a common denominator? And that common denominator really is their circadian rhythm. I mean, I don't know how much more of a common denominator you can get when it's in every single cell, which means I need to look at this. And if it means, hey, I get my, I can talk to my skilled nursing facility and tell, the aides, hey, can we just find out, okay, where's east in the building? And when everybody goes down to the dining room, can we just take them out one door, go around the building and back into the front door so that they get some exposure to light, even if it's just 2 minutes? Can we get that? In my therapy team, can I have that? Can I get with the activity director and recommend things that are done outside? I mean, just little things like that. And a lot of it is intuitively what we know. You shared about the East and the West, and I really thought about that, and I was cracking up because we talked about it. This is all natural light in my office, and I didn't realize my office. This is the East sun, and my home is perfectly situated, and I was noticing I myself gravitate. So in the morning I'm here, at noon the sun is right over top of my home, and then the afternoons I go to my study in the back to do other work. And so I didn't realize it until you pointed it out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I naturally do that. Like I naturally sit outside, like about between 2 and 3 I'm outside, which is the west sun, right? So it's really paying attention to what are our bodies telling us naturally, and are we listening and being okay with it? We have to be in control of our health. We can't rely on, doctors are there to guide us, they're there to give us recommendations, but it really is up to us to take ownership. And that's one of the things I think that the pandemic has really shown all of us, is that we have to take ownership. And so, your facility, your school, or your work might not be able to reconfigure your desk and reconfigure everything, to get this. But what can you do? Can you get the blue light computer glasses? Can you change your settings on your computer? And by the way, you can. You can.
Yeah, even major interfaces. We've talked about this before. YouTube has a dark mode setting. Facebook has a dark mode setting. I believe even Google search engine now has a dark mode setting. I mean, major platforms that everyone uses usually now incorporates a dark mode setting, so that instead of looking at a predominantly white negative space, it's a predominantly gray or black negative space. So it's creating a different contrast value at night.
And it really does help the overall vision of the person. So, yes, we're talking about circadian rhythms, but it really does help the eyes themselves. I have an uncle who has MS, and I was out there in August visiting them out in Phoenix. Phoenix, great sun out there in Arizona, right? And so I literally showed him on his phone, and he was just blown away that you could change it, first of all. And then he was like, wow, my eyes aren't as tired. It's like, yeah. And for somebody who falls a lot, this is important. And so a lot of the things, we have to look at the environment. So for OTs and PTs, yes, we want to look at, the muscles and what can we do. But many times we don't get that much time with a client or a patient. We have to come in and say, okay, what can I do? And so in the outpatient setting, this is what I can do in my setting when you're coming in to see me. But here's what I need to make sure that at home. How much light are you using at home? Are you opening the curtains in the morning? It's one thing that I have light in my home, natural light, but do I open the curtains? Do I have, when I'm reading, do I see myself, using a lamp and the natural light, or do I see myself in a dark room with just, the LED little nightlight thing that they try to tell you to put on your books? Don't do that, guys. Don't do that. can I get overlay? So one of the things that when you're working with clients that have dyslexia, we talk about using color overlays. So back in the day, we used to have the overhead projector, and then you have the little floppy different colors that your teacher would put on. So you can purchase those to put over just paper, like so your regular paper. If you're having to read a lot, most people don't use paper anymore to read; they use their computer. But still, using an overlay is another thing that you can do. So there are adaptive things that you can do within the environment that are going to help support what it is that you're saying. But for our patients, we need to look at, putting the night lights down. So there's this great little, and I have them in my home. I should have taken a picture for you. They go over the outlets, and down at the bottom, there's 4 little lights, and they're light and dark activated. So you put them around, and they illuminate the floor in the nighttime. So I'm a big person that says don't use a nightlight. But in the geriatric population, these are things that you need, because a lot of times they're not going to remember to turn on the light before they go to the bathroom, because they think I've been doing it for 50 years. Why do I now that I'm, 80, why do I need to turn the light on? I've been doing this, forever. And so we want to make sure that, that's something that you would want to have. So it's illuminating the floor. And you've talked about that too, of where the eye receives light in. Yeah. And so, a big thing with kids, we always want to have them with this night light, or we want to leave the bathroom light on for them. Not a good idea. We want to have a different type of light that's down at the floor level, so that it's illuminating there. So it's not giving that I'm awake, component.
100%. And you've brought up so many critical aspects of the light and health conversation all in one. And I want to break up a few of them because we only have a few more minutes left. And I think it's important to highlight these elements. Is that, first and foremost, before I forget, you mentioned the risk of senior falls, right? Lighting is such an integral component to preventing senior falls and preventing falls in general, but particularly senior falls, because what we've seen in evidence-based research, and as we know, right, is that first of all, we know that the eye is drawn to the brightest point in the room, and that's typically lighted in some way, right? Now, at night, we have this high contrast value of, okay, it's really dark. So the brightest point in the room should be a little bit smaller so that we have an ability to create a visual focus, right? That's that visual motor skill where we're able to focus on one area rather than be overwhelmed with so much stimuli. And so a lot of times what individuals wind up doing, or what facilities wind up doing, is that they put on more overhead lighting or general ambient lighting, and they increase the output of that lighting so that it's a really, really bright environment. And they think that that's going to help seniors be able to have more balance and coordination and visual acuity to be able to get, from point A to point B, when really what we need to be doing from a coordination standpoint, from a visual motor skill standpoint, and from a circadian health standpoint, is remove excess general ambient lighting and create focused low level light that frames the direction or the access point that they're trying to get to. So what we've done in a lot of lighting studies is taken amber lights. We've removed as much blue content as we can. We've taken linear amber lights and framed door frames for important access points so that they create this focused visual field while also not impeding their circadian health. And it has reduced falls by over 70% in these applications, which is huge. I mean, you talk about the life cycle cost of a fall for a patient or for a facility or both. We're talking about preventing surgeries for broken or fractured bones and tissue repair. We're talking about reduction of therapeutic services and the cost of, the medical personnel.
Okay, that's
no offense, right? But I mean, well, at the end of the day, they're coming to you for this, and you want to give them a quality of life. At one point or another, someone's going to fall. They're going to have a reason to, right? But we want we want them to be able to heal and recover. And especially for seniors, we want to keep maintaining a quality of life. And, reducing falls is a big aspect of that. It reduces pharmaceutical costs, right? For pain management, right? So when we're talking about potentially stabilizing a global economy, and you take something as simple as a lighting intervention that can reduce senior falls by over 70%, that's huge, right? That's insane. And
Sorry,
huh?
for the home health therapist, people go into the home, they're always telling you to remove the rugs, because that's where they fall. No, people, if they have rugs there, you leave them with their rugs. You wait to think on the airplane. What do they say? They say the floor will illuminate, directing you where to go. That's what you need to be doing in the homes. You need to be able to help them illuminate where's the bathroom, so that I can go easily find it. And I'm not talking about like the big lights. It's like you said, the low ambient, as much blue light gone as possible. That basically says, here's your bathroom.
Yeah. Circulatory path light. That's all
Yep.
you need. Circulatory path light, right?
Yep.
So that's the second point, is the low level lighting and creating a nice circulatory path light for them to be able to use. It's the same concept, right? We want to frame out areas that they can focus on. We want to prevent, someone from tripping on something, but we also, again, don't want to impede their circadian rhythm and keep them awake or tell their body to start running day active genes in the middle of the night just because they had to wake up and use the restroom or something. Super, super important. And yeah, there's so many other things that we could touch on in terms of, the light and health conversation. I feel that we've covered so much ground, and I thank you so, so much for contributing and providing so much insight and sharing some of the codes. I would like to have you repeat so that I can post. You said check out low vision independence measure revised, right?
That is actually, so if you're an OT, you can get that off, and it's an AJOT, American Journal of Occupational Therapy. It's a research article. It's really valid, good reliability. If you are working in peds, you can definitely use the Berry, which is a battery test. So don't just do the VMI. Most people will only do the VMI, but you want to do all three components of the visual development test so that you have that baseline and you can really start to look at. You can use the test of visual perceptual skills. So these are tried and true measures that will give you that, definite component. But then the other part is that, so the revised low vision measure, that's a questionnaire. So those are still valid, very valid. But having your clients and even your parents create a sleep diary is very important too, along with their food journal, right? Their food diary, so that you can work those in together. So the whole key is we want to prevent. Yes, we need to rehab and help people adapt. But where we are right now is we really are focusing on preventative. How do we prevent this moving forward? And it's not going to be a quick answer, and it's not going to be one. You're going to feel like you're light years, pardon the pun, light years ahead of what's going on, because you really need to be educating and advocating for your clients. And I will tell you, for all of you, the number one way to advocate best for your patient and your client is to do it yourself, is to learn your circadian rhythm, see how it affects you, keep tracks, make changes. So then you can share with them, well, here's the app. Like right away, I downloaded that app and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is wonderful. It gives you little reminders. Hey, go take a break outside. Okay, well, if it's raining, but I can go stand in front of the window and get a little bit more, so there's a lot to be said by being an advocate, by being a participant in it yourself. Okay. So that's the biggest part, and just, get the kids outside. There's lots of research, and if you guys want to, ask later, I'm happy to give you more information, but,
yes, I will share your contact information when I will be sharing your citation and resources link. I will share your contact information. I will also be sharing in today's educational extra something called a social rhythm calendar. We talked yesterday about bipolar disorder and University of Pittsburgh's neurological department, their clinical research with patients, and they created something called a social rhythm calendar. I have taken their calendar calendar, given them their props where, where due. I've given them the shout out inside the calendar, but I've revised it to include lighting measures, sleep time measures. And so that way you can fill it out. So you can record what your sleep wake times are on a day-to-day basis and start to really track over a 7-day period or more, however long you use it. And it's like journaling where you can see, okay, am I waking up day to day within 15 to 30 minutes of the same day? Or is it, or within between days, or is it an hour to 2 hours, right? Because remember, with with the right lighting cues, you should be staying on track. And if you're not getting the right lighting cues throughout the day, then you are throwing your body off by about 15 minutes every day. So if you're starting to notice that, okay, my sleep time between, day 1 and day 2, when I fell asleep was 2 hours, and when I woke up was 2 hours, well, divide 2 hours, 120 minutes by 15 minutes. And that's roughly how many days your circadian rhythm has been thrown off, right? And that's a critical component to getting you back on track. So you want to see a nice even baseline of, okay, I'm only waking up and falling asleep between, about 15 to 30 minutes every day. And that means I'm keeping, a normal baseline. It also it helps you journal and log when your meal times are. You can add in the notes section what your meals are. There's also a section that calls out for known kind of potential social jet lag indicators, if you will. Okay, are there going to be events throughout this week that I know are going to impede or restrict my ability to get to bed at a proper time? I know I have a birthday party this Thursday I have to go to that might keep me up late, right? Or I have a wedding I have to go to this weekend, and a bachelor party and a rehearsal dinner the night before that. So there's going to be like 3 days in a row where I'm going to be up really late, and I might be consuming lots of sugar or lots of alcohol. And that's going to be an indicator that, your rhythm might get disrupted over the course of those days. There's also a section that you can fill out with unknown events that may kind of contribute to social jet lag as well. So it gives you a way to take all of this very intangible information and to ground yourself and look at it in a really practical and logistical way and make observations that you then can turn into values added steps to improve certain lifestyle behaviors, and thus improve your well-being, because you're tending to your circadian health, and your circadian health is that foundation, right? If you create a crack in the foundation of a building, it's going to spread and it's going to start cracking the pillars and the beams, and then the windows are going to shift, and next thing you know, the roof is coming down. And you don't want that to happen to your body, right? You don't want to put a crack in your circadian health, so then you're not able to digest properly, and then you gain too much weight, and then you're too worn down to be able to exercise, and then you get depressed about that, and then you fall asleep, you're sleeping more and more, and it just becomes this domino effect of wellness pillar after wellness pillar not be getting harder and harder to juggle. And we don't want that for you. We want a preventative health care technique that is going to work for you. And that's why this workshop was designed the way that it was designed, to create a personal and intimate caretaking experience for yourself, so that every day you're layering a little bit more information, so that it is easier for you to start making the observations that you didn't even know you needed to make. Right. And for you to start creating solutions based off of those observations little by little. So I hope that helps. Do you agree, Anna?
Absolutely. And guys, you want to write it down. Don't rely on a watch or any of those other things, because that's adding that's messing up with your electromagnetic fields while you're sleeping. That's a whole nother conversation you can bring into later. So pen and paper, yes, pen and paper, log it that way is best. So that you're not bringing something else into your sleep environment. But yeah, absolutely. And there is research more and more coming too of the, seasonal affect disorder, so that's another component of that's just circadian rhythm. That's just the old phrase, right? But really there's lots of research out there. And I would encourage all of you PTs and OTs to really, if this is an area that you're seeing and you are in your practice, take a deep dive, and you'll definitely get more referrals, because nobody's really openly having this dialogue with doctors, and there's definitely area for research. So please consider doing some studies on it to help.
Yes. And Anna, I believe that you also have a continued education course for sleep health in occupational therapy practitioners, correct?
I do. I have it's sleep. It's the occupation of sleep from a sensory processing lens. So it's looking at that whole sensory processing component on, like we talked about it in our little bit earlier, the pineal gland, it stays on. And so how do I address that? And what's going on with my whole entire sensory system, and which goes along with circadian health for sure. So
Cool.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, I'll be dropping your contact information in your site references in our extra post, in addition with some other materials. And yeah, I hope that everyone, reach out, drop a comment. Thank Anna for joining us today. If you have questions, drop your questions in the comments. We will get your questions answered. Remember, these interview videos are going to stay up indefinitely, whereas the first 5 days of education, those will be removed on December 19th. All of the interdisciplinary interviews stay up for as long as Wi-Fi and the platforms are available. So, take advantage of them and ask a question anytime. We'll make sure that myself or Anna get back to you. So yeah, thank you so much, Anna. And I look forward to continuing a collaboration and a relationship with you. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you gained a lot from this discourse between Anna and I. She shared some wonderful information about some of the kind of insurance codes and the ways to look at it. I know that right now, and we've talked about this in past workshops, that you really need to have a diagnosis in order to get certain services covered by insurance. And if we start opening up these conversations with medical practitioners in kind of a supply and demand way, if you will, right? Like, we demand this information, we demand that you know it, so you need to be supplying these services, right? Maybe we can actually start to see circadian rhythm disruption become a part of that visual disturbance code. That this is really what these workshops are about, is to start to get people to start taking ownership and responsibility for your personal caretaking, but also to expand the conversation wider so that we can start seeing real change in general health care and then kind of from an economic development standpoint, if you will. And so these are, like we said, we didn't know enough about circadian rhythms. We didn't know enough about light. And now we know so much about both of those fields of interest and how they are intertwined, that it is so important for us as community members to understand it as well. Just like we understand nutrition is important to, or healthy food is important to nutrition, and exercise is important to physical fitness. So again, you wouldn't have proper nutrition and physical fitness if you didn't have that underlying foundation of circadian health being maintained. So really tend to it. I hope that you're using your late wellness guidelines. Tomorrow, we are going to be meeting with Annette Krop-Banesh. She is a chronobiologist and a science communicator who does kind of what we did today, right? She takes a lot of really complex, dense, hard to understand information, and she breaks it down into ways to make it understandable and relatable for community members like you and me. And she's just has a wonderful heart and is very invested in the biological light conversation. And I think it's going to be a really fun insight, especially for those of you who are looking to realign your circadian rhythms and really start tending to your sleep health in a more in-depth way. We're going to talk a lot about sleep chronotypes tomorrow and how to use that to your advantage. So stay tuned. I look forward to joining you and serving you again tomorrow, the last day of the Light Wellness Experience workshop. You're almost there, guys. Stay with us. And yeah, I will see you soon. So remember to take care. And as always, live lighthearted. See ya.